I'm just checking it now. I've sent it to him. It's not up yet.
Welcome all to the meeting this afternoon. As council, This looks a little bit different for the start of our meeting today, and I'd like to welcome our guests who are here and will be recipients of a bit of recognition for the hard work that has been done in our community through the COVID response earlier this year. I'm just going to start with karakia and council affirmation. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, e mā kina kina ki uta, e mā te rāta ki tai. E hi ake nā te atakura, e io, e uka, e hauhu, tihei, e mōhio. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens resolve this. Always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. But we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek better. Slow to take offence at all heads of the good. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Southern District and its communities. We will. That takes it.
During this first part of the presentation, I just asked Liz and Barry to come and join me. When we determined that it was a good idea to try and recognise some of the good work that has been done, we thought that it was good to do this in partnership with people who are connected to us here at Council, and Barry runs sometimes, and Liz, Chair of Tohu, who between us all the type 3 and being able to discuss who we wanted to really recognise today. We've heard countless anecdotes from people who are telling stories about the good work that was done for them or for their family. We received over 100 nominations of people who wanted to share the good news about what had been done. And we knew from all of that we couldn't have the work. So today isn't about saying this act was better than that act, saying these acts were all done. And we, in a sense, certificates to everyone who was nominated, but just as a way of highlighting some of the good work, there are 4 presentations today. I'm going to just give you an example of a couple who aren't able to be here, but were nominated. So Barry Parker was nominated as Metro bus driver, but didn't know his name. The kind, curious, sensitive, professional manner in which this individual displayed driving the A20 Lincoln bus. And nominated for that. And if you've been on the bus, maybe you know the driver who's there. Catherine and Brendan Doherty were nominated by Janice Buckingham, and their reference here, my daughter and son-in-law looked after us the whole time by doing our shopping and anything we needed as we were unable to go out. And that was a fact that deserved rewarding, as there was no one else to do it for us. So Metro buses and Janice's daughter, these are the types of things that we're wanting to really acknowledge this afternoon. We've got 4 certificates. As I said, they're just a cross section. I'm going to present a couple of them, and then I'll ask Barry once to present as well. Let's start with Rachel H. Rachel is going to come forward. So Rachel, come and stand up here, Rachel. Rachel was nominated twice, and her first one is from Sophie McInnes. As lockdown became a real possibility, Rachel contacted all the practicing artists known to her via cell and creative network and set up a Facebook group to help them all communicate about how to maintain some kind of income during alert level 4 and beyond. This was an essential support service for those who rely financially on exhibitions, events, classes, and so on, which were obviously impossible during lockdown. She also helped those eligible for Creative New Zealand grants, promoted anyone who set up online tutorials, invited everyone to Zoom chat about how they were all doing and so on. Rachel was also passionate about the arts and keeping people entertained during lockdown, particularly those involved in creating TV series we binge on, movies we love, books we read, and music we listen to. In addition to all this, Rachel is also a volunteer with Two Rivers Community Trust, who had their work cut out for them with welfare support. She farms with her husband and does parenting, schooling her sons. I don't know where she found $1,000 a day for this, and she certainly didn't get paid much for it. That's why Rachel is COVID hero. Yay! Rachel is the coordinator of information for the Melbourne response to COVID-19 using her IT skills. Rachel documented information and lists of volunteers and vulnerable residents in the Melbourne area. In addition, Rachel assimilated information onto the various community Facebook pages, giving residents valuable, up-to-date information and details of who to contact and requiring assistance. This information was updated regularly. In addition, Rachel helped with posters that were placed around the community, giving residents valuable information and details of where they could get help. Rachel also helped with food bank, doing those in need parcels. We're very grateful and very much appreciate Rachel's expertise in IT, computer skills that does get the information out to the wider community, and that was from Rachel. So well done, Rachel.
So today I'm here to acknowledge two amazing events. Manu and Paul, although we've only got Paul with us here today, Manu must be back still working hard. So they were nominated by three people, one being Paul Weber, Heather and me. We talked about how Manu and Paul supplied lunches for the essential workers throughout the COVID-19 period, spending countless hours making sure everyone had lunches packed for them ready every day. People including Westpac Rescue, Red Cross and more. They also provided Mother's Day support during COVID, making sure that there were Mother's Day gift packs for people to purchase. The second nominee came from Lynn Lowry, who talked about her mother, who was 92 years old. Paul and Mother would not take from her and made a special delivery to her door every week, but they did a special touch as well, and that they drew a smiley face on it and signed the package as well. And Lynn's mother looked forward to that and her smiley face each week, which continued until she could get out and back down there herself. So Lynn wanted to acknowledge the kindness, the professionalism, the real care that was shown by Manu and Paul to the people in our district, and that they deserve recognition from everyone. And also acknowledging that they supported 40 members of the Leaston senior citizens with a very enjoyable meal at their own cost. So congratulations to Manu and Paul for yes.
Thank you. I'm going to call Jane Hott up. Jane, would you like to come up, please? You can see by Jane's uniform, she's one of society's unsung heroes anyway. Here's on any given day of the week, any time of the year. Jane's probably an ambulance or another vehicle getting to a place we hope's not ours, I suspect. And Jane's an exception to the exception. She's actually volunteer, so she doesn't get paid for this great work here and colleagues too. Jane was nominated for the COVID Hero Award by Rob, and I guess Rob, you were in the double with Jane, and when the pandemic hit, watching TV, seeing what was happening around the world and indeed in New Zealand, but particularly around the world, this terrible virus was sweeping, killing, putting people in hospital. And all of a sudden, James popped out, getting to the normal call outs, going into the unknown, and it was the unknown, still pretty much it. So Jane basically was putting herself into a very dangerous situation. Being the person that you are, so rapidly and well, Jane got that aside and effectively went into other people's bubbles, not knowing what was there. Why did she go there? Because effectively she was a caring person, otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you do, and a helpful person, but she went there because she primarily had to, and without the, I guess, the Jane Fox of the district, a lot of people would not have gotten here and the teaching that they needed, and so on. So Jane, an amazing effort.
And I'm only one of many people that do this lot of work as volunteer. So thanks for looking at that.
And Kenny was nominated by Ian Collins. So that's the first thing to get out of the bag, but my wife and I live in Lincoln, and both in our 70s. Kenny and Karen also of Lincoln, and the young of the young generation. Was our food, I like that. Was our food and groceries lifeline during the COVID-19 lockdown. We lived in 4, 3, and 2. Isolated in that bubble, we were starved without being a regular supermarket runs for us. She generously and voluntarily included in her trips for her own family's needs. In the early, uncertain times of anxious and lockdown and level 4, and so much was unknown, community transmission could not be ruled out. Venturing from one's bubble was brave. Verso Brothers was nothing. It means shopping longer and travelling a wee bit further. Kenny willingly did this for us. She would phone in advance for our shopping list, and then on her way home, do our groceries in a front bag, mask and glove, while I stood back, also mask and glove. When she was gone, I would then go forward and bring them in. It was often dark and misty at the time, which added to the drama. Thank you, Kenny. You are
Yeah, sure.
Thank you to Shell District Council. It's a really good initiative. Acknowledge all the community work that goes on. I'm just one of very many that have obviously made a difference to the community, and Ian Collins himself helped out with a lot of the community as well. So thanks a lot for help with the pressures. Thank you.
So we're just going to close this piece of the meeting by singing Council Waiata. Hopefully the guests have it. Please join in and sing with us. And the council goes on to have a day. Oh, one Makiore, Kite Bakie, Oh, Rakaya, Kite Tokare, Ewai Hora, Ehora Kie, Inate Oraka, Onaimiye, Manawaira, Victorinae, Mahu, Mahatu, Matatuwe. Retired members of the town, Tim Horace, Greece out here. Very here for this place. You will, and it was a hard time. So well done to the recipients today. Well done to the other 100 who are at home who will receive your certificates. And just well done to us. level 4, and what was a really strange lockdown earlier this year. Our thoughts go out to those in Auckland at the moment who are working through what level 3 looks like, and it's hoped that out to becomes level 1. Lord, thank you. We have no apologies this afternoon. Everyone's present. No extraordinary business that we made aware of any conflicts of interest that are captured during through the normal processes. There are none. We've had a COVID Heroes presentation. Thank you everyone for that. It was good to acknowledge those examples of the good work that has been done. Confirmation of minutes from Wednesday the 12th of August. A mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Seconded, Councillor Epeha. Any discussion on those minutes, pages 11 through 24? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, declare it carried. Minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Audit and Risk meet on 5th of August, pages 25 through 32. Mover and seconder. Moved Reid. Seconded. Oh, sorry, their hand was up. That's, seconded Murray. Lemon. Any discussion on those minutes? All those in favour say aye. Against, declare it carried. We have the matters requiring attention, which has changed a wee bit over recent times.
Sorry,
Councillor Alexander.
just before we move on to that, will we be having the representation review committee meeting, subcommittee minutes at some point appearing in this list as well?
You most certainly will, and starting the meeting of the 9th of September.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Glen Tunnel drainage is on a future meeting. Arthur's Pass stormwater assumptions and uncertainties around the long-term plan and sections at Mill Pond Lane for a future meeting. First report today is on pages 33 through 52, and it's the Chief Executive's report. Firstly, that we receive the report and adopt the recommended changes to the delegations manual. Moved Councillor Bland, seconded Councillor Mugford, and David, I'll hand to you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much, councillors. Good afternoon. Procedural report for information this month, starting off with reference to the quarterly economic survey prepared by Infometrics for the March quarter. Obviously a wee bit out of date now, and it is attached on pages 42 through 51 of the agenda, and is also accessible on Council's website for anybody requiring any further information. I guess the key notes are continued strong growth of the councils, as you were, of the district's population. House sales up by 17.2%, value of houses modest 1.3% for the year to March 2020, and also significant number of building consent growth, up in fact 25.4%. So all in all, a very good read. Over the page, the rates rebate scheme for the information of the community. The central government announcement recently that the maximum annual rebate has been increased from $6.40 to $6.55 annual rating rebate, and they've also increased the abatement threshold from 25,660 through to 26,150. Bearing in mind these are central government figures. Any ratepayers requiring further information on the rates rebate or assistance in filling out their rates rebate application, please come and either see Council Customer Services staff or make a phone call into the Customer Services Centre, and staff will help you through that. Top of page 35, Mr. Mayor, I talk about the forthcoming Community Planting Day, which is, we're aiming to do this with our newest residents being warmly invited to join long-term residents at a planting day, which is being held at Chamberlain's Ford Recreation Reserve, and it's on this Sunday coming, 6th of September, from 9:30 through to 12 o'clock. On the day, we'll be planting around 1,000 trees, and people are encouraged to bring their families and I guess leave their mark on Selwyn landscape for the future. So a really good initiative there. Also pointing out to the business survey, which is underway, helping council plan activities to support businesses in the community, such as topics for speakers at the likes of Business After 5 series, and also the various breakfast meetings that we have. And it's our intention to run the survey at regular points in the future. And a link to that survey can again be found through Council's website. And finally, Mr Mayor, several pages of proposed changes to our delegations manual to reflect current staff roles and responsibilities in respective positions. Happy to answer any questions, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Miller and then Councillor Lemon.
Page 38, just the tendering process, MD 101. Just some clarification around the level of a tier 3 manager. I guess from our tendering organisation's point of view, this is the most critical point of integrity in the organisation when the tenders are opened and scheduled. Is that, in your opinion, the level of management input high enough? And just a yes or no, I suppose, is okay for me.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes I am, Councillor Miller. Yep, comfortable with that, those names.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. It's just around, commend the idea of the planting day. I'm just reflecting on a conversation had at the Selwyn River Rating Group meeting 2 years ago, where they expressed some concern about some plantings being contrary to flood control on the river, and just wanting to make sure that we don't impinge on that. Perhaps just the chief executive, perhaps just follow up with the river engineers and make sure that we're not impinging on that waterway. It might be just a courtesy to talk to the CAN staff on that. Also, I guess we're still under level 2 on that Sunday, so there'll be a matter of crowd control numbers, I should imagine. So, yeah.
It's Sunday 2 weeks away.
Yes. Oh, big done. Thank you. You're right.
David, you'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Well, Mr Mayor.
Any further questions? It's been moved and seconded to receive the report and approve the appointments. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. The next item is Canterbury Museum Trust Board Member Appointment Process. That we approve an appointment process is presented here, and B, that we appoint, and I'm going to suggest Councillor Miller be inserted there, to the Canterbury Museum Trust Board Member Appointment Committee, who will, along with other appointment committee members, review the candidate long list, agree on the approved shortlist, conduct shortlist candidate interviews, make recommendations to us, and recommend a final candidate to appoint. This will be done in conjunction with Christchurch City and using the expertise of CCHL, and will also mean that there's the opportunity to understand the needs of the current board and the work stream of the board over the coming years to ensure that the skills that get appointed to the board match the workload that's in front of them. I'm happy to move that. If someone want a second? Thank you, Gallagher. Are there any questions? David, would you like to say anything?
Mr Mayor, no, you've covered all of the key points that I was going to address. Just refer everybody to page 54, which talks about the process that CCHL will undertake to assess those competencies. But as with you, happy to answer any questions though.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. We'll discuss this with you, but just confirming you're happy for your name to be there. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Item 3 is pages 56 through 106. Ask Murray Washington to come to the front of the room. This is a major piece of change in New Zealand at the moment. We've discussed it many times around what the government is looking to do with Three Waters reform of that sector, and also what the by implication changes might be for local government beyond just this change. There's been a lot of work done at the Canterbury level amongst the mayors, the chief executives and the water engineers, and sometimes the same and often different meetings to make sure that we can get a really good outcome for Canterbury. And the presentation that Murray will talk us through his paper is securing tranche 1 money from the government. And for us, that's about $10 million. It's 5 million. That becomes 10 million if more than 2/3 of Canterbury opts into this as well. My understanding is that most councils are working towards a similar yes on this option, on this tranche 1 money, which gives us some cash up front to do some work. It means that we are obliged to share information with the government around decisions that they may want to make around the aggregation of supplies and changes within the sector, but it doesn't tie us into making future decisions which will need to be made over the next 12 months
as to whether we go any further with this work stream. So Murray, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't intend to spend more than a minute on this. I'll just highlight a couple of key points. One is that on the page, recommendation on page 56, to agree to sign an MOU, which has to be done by the end of August, but the funding agreement, which has to be done by the end of September. So they don't have to be both signed this week, only one of them. On page 57, last note, we intend that the draft delivery plan for Selwyn District Council to spend our grant will be considered by council at the meeting of 9th of September. It will be an earlier discussion, a briefing session on the 22nd of September, and there'll be an opportunity all the way through September to refine that if necessary. And so at the end of the day, sign the funding agreement by the end of September. So we want to really make sure that it's a robust process of identifying projects. Moving further, that's clarified on page 62, that just clarifying the MOU needs to be signed by the 31st of August, which is Monday, and the funding agreement and delivery plan by the end of September. As the Mayor has indicated, on page 63, we have got the draft, amended draft resolution from the Canterbury Mayoral Forum. And the key point, there's a couple of key points of that. First is the involvement of mana whenua. That's become something that's come out quite strongly through all the discussions with central government, and members have been appointed to the steering group. But the more importantly thing is a unanimous decision by the Canterbury mayors who were at the last meeting that they want the regional allocation to be dispersed on the same basis as the local allocation. So there won't be a regional projects or regional pots, it'll be allocated on the same basis, which on the numbers we've seen is the $10.66 million. And in terms of options, two options: agree to sign or not agree to sign, and the recommendation is that to sign. Agree today to sign it. My understanding from the emails that are flying around at 100 mile an hour, Christchurch agreed Tuesday, Waimak Monday, Timaru a couple of weeks ago. Haven't heard of any councils that are having any second thoughts on this. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. And the only other thing I'll mention is that the mayors in their discussion around the regional allocation, the discussion initially started with we would put $1 million aside, and that would be the regional piece to do all of this work around what's best for Canterbury, and then distribute the rest of the money as per the government's allocation model. It became clear during the discussion that so long as the money was more secure in being given to Canterbury, because we have to give the funding model to government around how it's going to be spent, it was much easier if that was done post the money coming to councils and then our share being given to the Canterbury work on the same basis that it would have been if $1 million had been spent. And $1 million is a top dollar there. We talked about it, maybe it costs between 600 and 700, if it can, that's great. But the understanding that there'd be $1 million put aside for that, contributions from each council. The only exceptions to that were for Waitaki, which there was some discussion around them having to pay twice for Otago Southland and for Canterbury modelling, and for the Chatham Islands, which the Chathams is such a small space and only receiving a tiny amount of money. It seemed that stripping money out of them for this work that we were going to undertake anyway wasn't a fair way to go. So other than that, the allocation remains as the government had predetermined. Councillor Alexander.
I'm happy to move these recommendations. We'd have to have rocks in our heads to turn down this quantum of funding, and with our responsibility initially being just to share some data. And I don't believe any of us in this room have got rocks in our heads, so that's a good thing. I'm very pleased with part 6 of the resolution that this does not bind us to continue in this process, because to date, if I'm honest, I can't see there's an upside for the Selwyn ratepayer in amalgamating our three waters with other councils who have up to date underfunded their three waters, I could only see it costing our ratepayers more to subsidise somebody else. So I hope to be proven wrong. And if I'm not proven wrong, then I'm unlikely to support continuing the process beyond this point. And my question I have to Mr. Washington is, up to this date, our use of the funding has been described as for those projects that are already in our long-term plan. The documentation here doesn't seem to be quite so restrictive. So if there are projects that aren't in our long-term plan but meet the requirements of the funding formula, are we allowed additional projects outside of those currently consented and in our long-term plan?
Yeah, my understanding is the only limit was it was not to be projects in your current annual plan. So the intention was you could bring work forward from future years in the long-term plan, or be newly identified work that council couldn't have funded because they had funding constraints. So that is the limit. There's clear limits on what you can spend it on in terms of maintenance, renewals and capital projects, and an encouragement to focus on water and wastewater rather than stormwater. So there's a few guidance. It's meant to be a liberal type, permissive type approach, but the devil will be in the detail when funding applications are made.
Someone wanted to second the motion? Councillor Lyle seconds, and then Councillor Miller, you want to speak?
Yes, please. I guess I understand from the document in front of us why the 50 million, that additional funding is being treated the way it is. But I do express some concern that the central government has in effect suggested to us by presenting it that way, that there is a bigger picture to present here. And I know, Sam, you've described the $1 million for a project as yet undefined. But you don't have to look too far to see a failure of planning when you look at Auckland's infrastructure around, and everyone, they've always believed that we're going to have enough water and everything's going to be right. And surely this 50 million was a great opportunity, not the whole lot of it, but a portion, to spend a reasonable amount of time looking from, as you say, the Waitaki to Kaikoura, about what we need for infrastructure for wider Canterbury and what might drop out of this. And I'd hate to see that $1 million get spent on consultants looking at committees rather than actually looking about what is it that Canterbury intrinsically needs in 2050 or beyond in the GCP partnership or whatever that is. And can we have a roadmap to that? And it may involve us being in the same position we are now, but it may involve us also being partners in a different organisation which helps deliver those things. So I'm not against the process, but I do express concern that I'm not sure that that the mayors thought this through enough before they decided to just chuck it all in the pot. And as I said, I understand the rationale, and I get that, but it does still concern me. And how is that $1 million, the work program for that, going to be decided, Sam? I mean, is it open for putting forward suggestions, or is there who's driving that project?
Murray might be able to answer that. There's a working group that's been put together. I think the first meeting's due.
Two elements to it. There's a steering group led by the Merrills, 5 mayors, plus 3 representatives from Ngāi Tahu. I see them as doing the governance role around this. There'll be a working party, and we're meeting on Monday morning to discuss some aspects of probably a project manager employed by the Secretariat and staff from each of the council, but we will try not to have it too large. We are finalising the proposal for professional services to put together the proposal. However, we are cognizant that across the country, everybody's doing a similar bit of work, and we're trying to engage with the DIA to ensure that there's not doing work that's already been done or doesn't need to be duplicated. And although we haven't finalised, the terms of reference haven't been finalised, the preference would be to spend as much time, as you indicated, on developing models that will work for Canterbury rather than just spending it all on data capture and analysis, because a lot of that's already been done. So it's about actually identifying what model will work best for Canterbury. And I think in particular with our iwi partners, we'll have a major say in that as well. So the intention is to spend as less as possible on data capture more and more as we can on actually good ideas.
Thanks. Kia ora. Thanks, Murray. Just following on from your discussion there around delivery, given the September 2020, the plan is to be submitted by the end of 2020. Is that a realistic timeframe? It's only a month away.
It is what it is. We have to put the plan together by the end of September to be approved by the end of October, to be started by March 2021 and be completed by 2022. Although, as I said, it's intended to be permissive, they are rules around the funding and application funding and reporting that are probably a wee bit foreign to us that we will need to work through. It is a tight deadline, particularly ensuring you're picking the right projects and that you can actually deliver them. There will be there's certain benchmarks around having to create employment, and that's a bit of a challenge in the sector we're working in. It's not something that untrained people can just walk off the street and do. So there's a few challenges, but it is what it is. To access the grant, we have to submit the funding program by the end of September.
Is on pages 107 through 118, and I'd invite Andrew Maisie and Mark Chamberlain to the front of the room. So Asset Manager Transportation and Team Leader Transportation for the monthly update on transportation.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. So as per usual, I will run through my areas of the report, picking up on anything of note for you, as opposed to going through everything in infinite detail. So in regards to the first item will be talking about the Transport Activity Management Plan. Staff are well and truly in the trenches at the moment in regards to developing our activity management plan, with a particular focus around developing the financial budgets and forecasts. We're very much having to dance, as we usually do at this time of the year, to NZTA's tune in regards to making sure we get the information supplied to them so that they can get it into the systems. So that's sort of all lining up for around mid-September. Remember, this is a sort of a multi-stage process, this being the first stage to get our initial information and budgets into NZTA, which then gets fed into the draft regional land transport plan for prioritisation, which then eventually goes off to the NZTA again for their review, and then the full circle comes back on us in terms of what NZTA has decided in terms of how we then finally configure our long-term plan. So it's a bit of an exercise, and no doubt you'll be aware of the fact that sometimes the cart is put before the horse in regards to what we have to do in these processes. In regards to the GPS, it was meant to have been released before this. We believe there's been a hold up relating to the current level 2 and level 3 restrictions, so that should be any day. But as I probably mentioned before, we always are running the risk with the new GPS and a potential election, how that may change or have to change if there's a change in government. So we always have to be prepared for that type of outcome. There's a great deal of work happening in the Greater Christchurch Partnership as we're trying to tee up a whole lot of work and information and outputs that feed into all these processes at the moment in terms of developing long-term plans and regional land transport plans. Public Transport Futures business case, there was a presentation to the Public Transport GCP, Public Transport Joint Committee last week on that. and that's now was sort of relatively well received in terms of what we're doing, proceeding with the PT Futures business cases. That's now going to get refined and then go forward to CAG and final joint committee endorsement by the looks of it in September. It was interesting too in terms of the PT joint committee that they also decided on the day that they would essentially disband themselves, agreeing with the initiative through the partnership to actually bring themselves into the fold of the Greater Christchurch Partnership because of the intrinsic and emerging importance of the integration of PT transport with urban planning and land use. There was probably likely to be a subcommittee that will support the GCP on public transport matters, but more along the operational side of things. So the last order of business for the PT Joint Committee will be basically the endorsement of the PT Futures business cases, and at that point, their job is done. The other work that's been going on in regards to the Greater Christchurch Partnership is the developing of the mode shift plan and also the TDM strategy. Both of those items of work relate to how we are trying to leverage funding from the government on our walk, cycle, PT activities, and anything else that we can do to meet travel demands going forward in the future. So that's important that we get that nailed down because that's, as I say, our leverage to funding, particularly like, for instance, our walking and cycling activities. The MRT business case, mass rapid transit business case, problem statements and benefits have been developed for that, but as a technical working group, we're conscious of the fact that we need to engage with elected representatives on this at a certain point coming very shortly so that you don't get any surprises in this space in terms of what you're expecting to come out of this process. You had the presentation recently from NZTA on Rolleston State Highway 1. I think that went generally okay. We've had a bit of a debrief with them on some of the matters that you raised and some of the wrinkles that I'm still concerned about in the process. Talking to NZTA this morning, they're hoping to get that business case to their board in September, at which time I'm hoping, and I keep pushing for making sure that there is some sort of public engagement and or notification of where they sit in regards to then going forward. Going forward, it moves into the detailed business case phase of all those all that activity. So there's quite a lot of work that they have to do in a short space of time to make that happen. Prebbleton intersection upgrades, there's nothing much more I can report on that. It's still progressing, still a lot of work being done, still a lot of people wanting outcomes that we can't necessarily facilitate through the land acquisition process. So that's still a challenge, but we are just still ticking along with that. Colgate's Rose legalisation, sorry. I think at this stage, Councillor Bob, we've teed it up for the 15th of September. Yep. So fingers crossed with alert levels and all those type of things, we can make that happen. Rolleston Town Centre, I would just like to acknowledge what I think is a fantastic outcome that we've achieved for the upgrade of Tennyson Street. It's already been picked up on a number of people's radars, including NZTA's, in terms of a really good outcome and trying to merge in this whole sort of, higher amenity road space, slow speed zone and things like that. So I'm really pleased with the way it's turned out. Good, I'm glad to hear it. I've got an item in there, we've got an item in there about the COVID related issues and things like that. There is a whole discussion around NZTA impacts on funding, and I just wonder whether or not, Mayor Sam, that you'd like me to give you a very brief update on the NZTA regional stakeholder meeting we had on Monday with NZTA. Yep, it seems like the best opportunity, doesn't it? Especially when it's fresh in both of our minds. So we had the new CEO of NZTA came down to talk to us as a region. That's Nicole Rosie, and she stood up there and explained to us where she's at, where she's going and where she wants to take the NZTA. Sort of picking up on the main points that she raised and were also raised on the day. She certainly acknowledged that things were not run the best previously and that there is a lot of work that TA need to do to improve things and the need to collaborate more with us. Obviously, the big question of the day, or the big issue of the day, is the funding from NZTA. She admitted that they have taken, like a lot of people around about the place, quite a big hit from COVID. Obviously, during the lockdowns and even continuing at the moment in Auckland, the lack of, or the reduction in taxes coming through from fuel use, road user charges and everything like that, their revenue is having a big impact. Previously, they have been out of pocket by about 600 million, of which the government has topped up, with the ability to for them to borrow another 300 million. But she made it very clear that this is pretty much it, and there's nothing left more in that in terms of where the government may come to the party with them. Certainly, she said that the current National Land Transport Fund was under significant pressure even before COVID, which they were concerned about, and I think we were also as well. So they are having some significant issues, and so will we, in terms of trying to align ourselves with what they're trying to achieve and what we're needing to try and achieve as well in terms of a funding aspect. They've already indicated to us that don't expect anything very much more out of them or the fund going forward into the future or into the immediate future. One good bit of news that David passed on just today or yesterday was our financial assistance rate has been reconfirmed as it still exists, which is good. I was a bit worried about that in terms of whether those would be trending downwards. Probably the one that I would be got my eye on the most at the moment now is the targeted enhanced financial assistance rate, which is the one that's really been so beneficial to us in terms of our big upgrade projects like the Prebbleton intersection upgrades and LED replacements and things like that, which is subsidised at the moment by 75%. No word yet on how that may continue or if it will still exist. I believe the NZTA has got a big focus on Road to Zero, and I think from their perspective of with that emphasis, the funding decisions that they will be making will be really sort of working around achieving those outcomes and requiring us to achieve those outcomes as well. And so in the formulation of our transport program going forward, we're certainly trying to dial that in. And when we have the opportunity to come back to you on a more specific time and date, I'll be explaining how we'll be doing that. But it will need us to step up if we want to meet those national, if you want to put it that way, obligations in this area. It was interesting in terms of Jim Harlan, the regional relationship manager, did quite a bit of talk on the region in terms of NZ Up and the funding that's been approved by the government and NZTA on a lot of these big stimulus projects. Rolleston here factored in quite highly in the discussion, and I think the NZTA were very pleased that we supported and appreciated what they've been able to achieve for us. I think that might have been the case, Sam. And in regards to going forward, I think the thing is that they made the point that it's very much more in the future, not just transport planning, but urban and transport planning for them in regards to where they see their role emerging into the future. There are a few things brought up on the day by others. I won't go into too much detail. There was a significant concern about the lack of Maori and iwi relationship and coordination with some of their strategic planning. There was also the wish that they saw, the region saw, to devolve more responsibility to the region for transport matters and decision making, and the capacity of the sector to actually respond to that sort of responsibility. And if my colleague from McKinsey hadn't brought it up, I would have certainly been doing so, but certainly making sure we don't lose the reference or the importance to making sure that we maintain and operate our rural networks, and not for them to get lost in the whole big discussion around just metro and those high growth and urban issues. And I've just summed up and basically in regards to what Nicole referenced in terms of the key takeaway from NZTA at the moment. It's about people, places and products. And really that's where I thought it was a really good summary in that aspect in terms of just focusing ourselves onto that aspect as well.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, the only addition I'd make to that from the NZTA briefing was that Ngāi Tahu as a treaty partner was missed out of all of their presentation, not acknowledged as being in the room. But so was Mackenzie and Timaru and Kaikoura, but none of them were mentioned either. So Christchurch, Waimakere, Selwyn, and Ashburton made it just onto the screen. And other than that, NZTA just did not engage or acknowledge the fact that there was a Canterbury presentation. And there was just another disconnect in that, which was a bit of a shame because we're trying to rebuild a relationship. I think Nicole herself did quite a good job at under speech notes and then wandered a little bit as far as not necessarily backing up our local government ability to be able to deliver projects and concern for what needs to happen on the rural non-major routes that aren't NZTA's priority at the moment. So there were some good signals, but there was also a bit of work to be done in that as well. I was pleased that she showed up, and we've invited her to meet with the mayors again so that she can actually talk, or so we can actually talk to her rather than just her talk to us in the meeting. So that'll be followed up in the next couple of weeks. Thanks, Andrew. Does that bring you to the end of your piece of the report?
Yes, thanks.
Great. I've got a couple of questions before. I'm sure there are others as well. Firstly, around the mode shift plan, I understand Steve Higgs is coming to present that to us in 2nd of September to the next councillor briefing. It will have been presented to NZTA by that date. And so it's really a heads up for our council about what has been presented rather than the opportunity for us to be involved in that. I wonder whether, Andrew, you could just tell us the process that we've been through to get to here so that we're not feeling like we're just trying to fight a rearguard action after it's been approved.
Yeah, so certainly it's been an initiative by the Greater Christchurch Partnership. Yep. And so there's been a working group consisting of all representatives from the councils and obviously NZTA, etc. So we've been working on it for some time now, and it was a request from the Minister of Transport for us to develop one as in the same vein as Auckland and Wellington. So you can be assured that we've had a very thorough going through of it in terms of from people like myself representing our council and obviously the others in terms of Waimak and Christchurch City and things like that. So I think it was presented to the Greater Christchurch Partnership. So essentially we've been working under their wing as well in terms of making sure we're aligning to their outcome. So yes, you're probably only seeing it now, but you can be assured that it's gone through a lot of rigor in regards to how all the partners have engaged and worked this through.
Thank you. And 4.5.8 LED streetlight installation. Just wondering if you're looking for some discussion from us around the assessment of what we do with decorative lighting, or whether you're just telling us there's an assessment process to follow. And I guess this is part of it sort of goes to the heart of what we do as a council, whether we reproduce like for like when things run out, or whether we replace like with standard, because that's a more efficient way to do it. And whether we often like to talk about how we treat towns uniquely and what they have within their town. And the same can be said of streetscapes. When a tree dies, we look to replace the tree. But we never, well, I haven't been a part of going through a process where we would look at all of the streets and all of the trees on all of our streets and say, what are the streets that actually need planting again, or planting for the first time ever, because the development 100 years ago didn't decide to put trees in. And so I just guess with the lights, there's a chance for us to have a conversation around, do we want to continue with boutique lighting that's going to cost everyone more, or is lighting actually something that's about the functionality in the evening, and a standardized process around we'll support the lights while they last for their life, but actually once it's past their life, as a council, this is what we replace them with. I think is worthy of a bit of discussion. So I don't know if there's any views from other councillors, and there may be there's lots of lights on, but if you want to include that feedback in your questions or commentary, we'll do that. And I'll just run down my list. Mark, Deborah, Malcolm.
Well, I was actually last on the list, but just on your comment on boutique lighting, Sam, I think it's important to continue the rollout of LED lighting across the district. It makes a big difference. We've got a wonderful night sky, and the LED lighting with a much more directive downwards light and much less lights spill upwards opens up that vista to more and more of our residents. And I know that it's an expense for these boutique lighting heads to get changed, but I think there's got to be a middle way where perhaps some of them, the more expensive or the more unique ones, get replaced with something more utilitarian. But
sorry, Mark, that's actually what I'm saying. We should move to LED, but should we always try and find boutique lights to replace boutique lights, or just standard LEDs to replace
I'm
boutique lights?
just supporting you in saying that we can continue the process, but and find the middle ground where we can.
Thank you. Deborah, you're welcome.
Sorry, Andrew, I may actually be ahead of myself, but on page 111, under 5.5, capital works. Oh, sorry, I am ahead of myself. Can I ask my question now?
No, we'll come to that after Mark's presentation. Malcolm.
Yes, I hear where you're coming from with the boutique lights. There's quite a few of them in some of the subdivisions in my community. I do, however, know that there's probably the opportunity to retrofit LED into those lights. The only problem we have is that the contractor that you're using to do this is one of the most expensive in Canterbury at this time. And they tend to have a control on the market. I'd encourage the investigation of retrofitting and be tying that particular company to a price.
Thanks, Malcolm. Murray?
Yeah, similar vein, actually, Malcolm. I guess my question that I was going to ask prior to Sam raising it was similar, and that's the assessment. Is the assessment about an engineering issue or a cost issue or both? And I guess before we make an arbitrary decision around this table, we need to know the cost, because if it's going to affect the budget we've got there, that's quite important. So just a bit of clarification, if it is in fact that you're looking at an engineering solution, you know, what the investigation, Andrew, what does that actually mean? Can you just clarify that for me?
You can answer that now.
Do you want me to answer LED questions now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. We'll have Sophie and then Grant, and we'll come back to any questions. Yeah. Sophie?
Okay. Kia ora, thank you for the report. As far as LEDs go, whatever the most efficient way of doing it is probably going to win out, but yeah, more information always good. But my main question was regarding the comment about NZTA and future funding going forward. Obviously the various plans around Rolleston on State Highway 1 are already underway. Is there a risk to things like the West Melton traffic lights on State Highway 73?
Well, have I got news for you? As from this morning, again, talking to my NZTA representative, if you remember rightly, Mike Blyleven came and was helping with the NZTA presentation on State Highway 1. And I think you, Councillor Reeve, asked the question about West Melton. So in a discussion with him this morning, he confirmed that they have appointed a project manager. They are appointing a consultant. And they are working through the process at the moment of doing some initial engagement with the council / community in regards to just making sure that the outcomes they want from that project are agreed, so they can start moving forward fairly quickly. So they're wanting to get the business case, a very sort of simplistic, to the point business case, wrapped up by the end of the year, so then they can press the implementation button. So to answer your question, it's all systems go by the sounds of it.
That's fantastic, thank you.
And that goes right to the top, because Rosie and Jim Harland at the meeting earlier this week both referenced West Melton and the flyover, specifically here in Rolleston. So it's on everyone's agenda. Councillor Miller.
So just some clarity, I've got some questions to the presentation he's already made, as well as LEDs. Do you want me to do the whole lot?
Yeah, throw it in now.
Okay. So firstly, often give some brickbats, but in this case, I'll start off with some compliments, which is always good. The crossings, pedestrian crossings in Lincoln, which have been lit and have the zebra poles on them, really loved by the community and great work. So often we don't give credit where it's due, but the staff have identified a problem, the community's identified and delivered it, and it's really well received. So thank you very much. I suppose in the vein of you can never keep your residents always happy, the LEDs, the feedback from the wider community, particularly fathers with daughters, is that they feel that because they are so directional, it's a bit darker at night walking around some of the side streets, and they're just wondering you know, that's that SIP-TED thing, I suppose. And it's no, you can never win that argument, but it's just the feedback that perhaps they feel not quite so safe between poles as they did before. And that's just a feeling, so that's feedback. Now moving on to the brickbats, which is not actually directed at you guys, so you can take a breath, but particularly looking at 4.5.9 on page 110, the 13.5 million pavement shovel-ready projects. I've been looking for an opportunity to voice my disquiet, and this seems to be the opportunity, I guess, is we have played by the rules, and Murray particularly gave us clear advice that we shouldn't put frivolous or applications in which probably didn't meet the rules and context. And I have to say, from my appreciation, I think we've been hard done by. When you look at the shovel-ready projects which have been dished out in other communities of all-weather turfs, community centres, sporting facilities and all sorts, clearly we shouldn't have, no disregard to you, Murray, but we shouldn't have listened to those rules and gone for the doctor, because you can't escape the view, whether it's cynical or not, is that we are being punished for being a non-marginal electorate, because clearly the lollies are being handed out on how marginal your electorate seat is. You can come to no other conclusion, because we had a well-structured program of applications which was going to create jobs and was going to deliver what the government asked for. And as yet, we haven't got a bean. And unfortunately, not even a media person here to even report this, but it is fundamentally unfair. And I think is taking a term from Australia, not the New Zealand way. Because is this the way we run our politics on pork barrel type delivery, where you go out and have a look and say, well, where can I get the most votes for my dollar? Well, I just don't believe that's right. And I don't know how we advocate for this, Sam. And maybe I'm burning some bridges for Sal here by putting my head above the parapet, but this just seems wrong, and intrinsically wrong, and a gut feel wrong. So that's my little bit on that one. But let's use an example. Cycleways, for instance. Well, Christchurch, dear old Christchurch, we love our neighbours, have got a substantial amount of money to create a cycleway from Sumner, which works out at $20,000 a metre. Well, great for Christchurch, but what could you have done with that money in our cycleway network if we'd applied? You know, it's just begs the question, doesn't it? And you have that problem. So I'm going to park that piece and move on to some Selwyn issues, I guess. And this probably is going to reflect on you guys, and to say it's more about us, I guess. The road maintenance budget's over budget by 10%, and we understand the reasons why. We've got a real roading demand. The question I raise as a governor is, why have I never been asked for a budget approval to go over budget? As yet, I've never received an application to me saying my budget is going to be over by 1.7 or $2 million. Can I have additional funding out of the general rate to make this program work? So I raise that and maybe pass that to the Audit and Risk Chair, because to me it seems nonsensical to have a budget which runs over and there's no credibility or accountability. So that's that. The final little bugbear I have, and I love the Tennyson Street Works, and I think they've done a fantastic job, and I'm asking for some reassurance here. We have new developments each side of that road. They're going to pull the pavers up and dig that road up to connect to the services. Well done.
Thank you. Andrew, do you want to just answer a couple of questions that were asked there and clarify what you're expecting around the LED lighting question?
Yep. Look, I do appreciate you've raised the point before. I just haven't had the time to get into the detail of it all, but I do know enough in terms of talking with our designers in regards to where we're trying to head with it. So basically, we've got an issue where we've got at the moment existing very decorative or boutique lights, as you've mentioned. I made the call very early on that we would not be trying to replace like with like. They're just too expensive, and they don't provide some of the efficiencies and effectiveness that a more standard light provides. And so basically what we've tried to do is actually find some middle ground between a very standard light and a very high-end light, and sort of trying to manage that balance. One of the things you may remember when I talked to you or explained to you about our LED lighting replacement program and the lights that we're putting in, they've got this end cap socket sitting on the top of the lights, that we can plug a control module into. So these very decorative lights or the boutique lights don't have that. We need that to be able to future-proof how we manage and control our lighting system in terms of turning on and off, dimming and things like that. So the prerequisite for any decorative light that we put up is to have that facility. And so by default, we are getting now more down to that more standard type of light, but with some decorative enhancement, because we've got lights on our township streets that are pendant lights that hang down like that. We've got ones that go out like that, and they all need a specific type of light to fit those poles and arms. And so we have to manage that. But what we're trying to do is standardize the type of light that's being used over the network and over those township streets without going full standard. A good example might be like in Rolleston here, you see what we call the Optimas, which are the tall lights with the sort of like the UFO type of lamp sitting on the top of them, and they would always referred to as decorative lights. We've replaced those with LED, very slim versions, and they actually look really good. The decorative part is left in the pole, but we've tried to make that sort of compromise. So that's what the direction we're trying to head to. I just need to get back to you with some better information to show you what that looks like. But that's where we're trying to head to.
Yeah, yep, I'll go through, take most of it as read, but I'll just highlight a couple, and road maintenance is the first one I've noted here in terms of expenditure. Well, in terms of this financial year, looking at trying to keep to the budget means that we are programming a much reduced schedule of reseals and rehabs on our network. So reseal program is about 46 kilometres at this stage to align with the budget that takes into account the pre-reseal repairs and things like that. So that's where we're programming, unless there's an okay to overspend. We're sort of going this year and that we're not going to do that. We're going to do, and just means we'll do less reseals this year, which has consequences in the future, but that's something we have to deal with as well. So unsealed roads assessment. So there's about 80% completed for this current 6-month lot of inspection. So that's going to go well. There'll be a report later in the year on the results of those. Our rehab program, as with just mentioned about the reseals, we had 3.1 kilometres in there, again, so we don't overspend overall, just taking in the Waimakere Gorge Road one out of there. So we're still doing rehabs, but just not as many as we originally want to, or that we can afford. So low cost, low risk projects. Yeah, so I've attached a schedule of projects that are there. This is sort of work in progress. I think Councillor Hassan's got a question on it, so I'll see what comes up with that. But that includes a whole variety of works, and trying to kind of tidy up the schedule to align it with what the template we have for NZTA for putting the projects there, and that's generally on project type. Then all the individual projects sits underneath it. So rather than have a long list of projects to look through, it'll be a summary of sealbacks or flag lights or wherever it is, or footpath extensions, and then other worksheets that sit in behind that. So that'd be a tidier way of doing it. So I just need to keep working on that. If you have any queries on that list and what's in the list and things like that, there's probably no point in us discussing it here, but please email me with any additions, queries, anything you want to add to it, we can discuss it and add it into the schedule, because this is an ongoing program of work. So it will keep going for a while. Whether that funding for that changes or not, for example, including seal widenings to a higher value for Andrew's already has mentioned to me that that's what may be in the future in terms of seal widening projects and things like that. So hopefully there's a higher threshold to be done under low cost, low risk. Traffic signals at Lowe's, Goulds, Smiths, Rolleston. The only thing there was it's basically completed. There's still bits of the green markings to do with the cycle lanes, or when they transition on and off road. But the Sharrow markings is something that was a bit of discussion about in terms of the left turn lane and the understanding of how that shared lane actually works. So the Sharrow markers wasn't say it's for cyclists only. It's a shared lane where cyclists can go down the middle and you just work in with the other traffic, and it's something that's used around the country. But we've put left turn arrows just to make it more obvious now, and had no comment since, but that may have happened anyway. It might have died down no matter what, but people seem to be using it as it was intended. What else was there? Windross Road widening intersection upgrades. Again, this ties in with the low cost, low risk in terms of how much we've got available to spend this year. The intersections with that hopefully will tie into the overall project rather than doing them separately, because it might all be able to be funded the same way, or that's the intention anyway. So And road safety update. So I have Jessica and Steph update this section for me. So that's just the programs they're working on. And if you want more detail on that, then please let us know. We'll have more detail on there as well, but it's sort of summary of what they're working on. And if you get it every month, then that may be enough. But if you want more, then just let us know. So welcome any questions, Councillor Hassan.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Look, just 5.5 capital works. I noticed that there's going to be turn 2 right turn bays from Leaston Road, and I'd like to understand where the located intersections are.
Oh, they're actually under construction at the moment. So one's at Old Bridge Road, with the turn off at Chamberlain's Ford. So there's been a bit of traffic there, particularly the holiday period. Been a few issues there. The other one's at Brookside Irwell Road, so just on the eastern side of Irwell Township.
So I'm still hoping for one to happen at the Goulds Road, Leaston Road intersection.
Yes, along with all the other intersections on Leaston Road, yes. Yeah.
But that one's had real fatal accidents, so, you know, just trying to highlight it.
Yeah, the right turn bay, the other two we're doing are at T intersections, and with the volume of traffic, particularly the Chamberlain's, turn off of Chamberlain's Ford, the shoulder was getting a lot of wear and edge brake and shoulder wear and things like that, and with people making a right-hand turn in the middle of the road, whereas I know Goulds Road had issues as well as rather other crossroads. That's more to do with the stop control rather than actually people making right-hand turns off the road. So that's why we're doing those two first, just with the crash history with right turns and things like that. So.
Yeah, just make a comment, Deborah, that if you get it in the LTP, it takes about 3 years, because I remember those presentations. So it's about, yeah, just get it on there now, and you'll be right in 3 years' time.
Well, let my constituents know that if they're not listening.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Miller.
No, it was a cheap shot. Well, I'm going to say it. Seeing the LTPs coming up, I look forward to receiving a similar level of fencing as the Leaston Doyleson community have received on their cycleway.
Thank you for the report, Andrew. Yes.
Yeah, just following on from Mark's comments about low cost, low risk. Basically, with the next NLTP, the NZTA have agreed to lift the limit on funding on a per project level from $1 million to $2 million, which is what we pushed as an industry and a sector really hard for. So that means that opens up a whole lot more opportunities for us to fund projects without going through a whole lot of drama with business cases and things like that. So for this coming LTP and the next NLTP, we will be maximising as much as possible getting projects funded through the low cost, low risk. So you may actually see a lot more in this category than you ever have done before. Part of that is as I think I might have mentioned earlier, is that we've been working with the NZTA on looking at a safety network program across the whole network. And that will be fed into where we can funding through low cost, low risk. So Councillor Hassan, using your intersection at Leaston and Goulds Road, that has specifically been identified through the Safe Network program with NZTA for upgrading. And so we're working through a series of those upgrades that would span over about the next 3 NLTP periods. Again, I come back to the fact that it's all subject to what we can fund and what NZTA can fund. But it comes back down to that concerted push by the NZTA around Road to Zero and trying to make a difference in 10 years' time, basically.
Yeah, Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. Doesn't increase the overall quantum of funding we're going to get. It's just the amount of documentation we've got around projects. Just to clarify, you're saying the funding limit for low cost, low risk is going up from $1 million to $2 million, but it doesn't imply that we're going to get any more overall funding for our roads. It's just where we categorise projects. Is that how it works?
Well, that is actually the dilemma I'm facing at the moment and trying to put together the next roading and transport program. On one hand, we're having the NZTA telling us that there's not much more funding to go around with all these issues that are going on. On the other hand, we're having NZTA telling us that they want to, prioritise Road to Zero and are willing to identify and program these projects with us, but we've got no confidence that they're going to provide their share of funding, let alone our own. So I'm trying to balance the two at the moment, and it's just going to be a sort of we'll just have to play it out and see what happens. But the simple answer to your question is yes, we will have to provide more funding if we want to work towards this Road to Zero program that the NZTA want us to.
Thank you. Can I just suggest for the next report that comes to us that it's basically rewritten bi-monthly, as we sort of said to the property guys last month, so that next time there's no carryover of the black, and it's only if it's going to be relevant to the next report, and then the one following you add the red, and then in 2 months' time you just redo the report, so you don't have to rewrite it all the time, but we also don't end up with really old information in there. And secondly, the low cost, low risk projects. I just wonder whether it's worth having them on attached to this agenda in a month's time, or whether you want to do that at a briefing, because I think for information for councillors, it'd be interesting to see what their list of projects looks like. And it's only sometimes when you start thinking about what's being done that you suddenly realise what's not being done as well, and can start to, as councillors, think about how we might feed into those priorities for you.
Yeah, either way, a briefing or a council meeting, just doing I would upload the Transport Investment Online for NZTA on our low cost, low risk. So we've had 2 years in the last year, what we've done and then what we're doing for this year, just to match the funding that we've got, which is about $4 million over the 3 years. So whether that increases in the future and we're able to do more projects, or we have $4 million and do $2 million projects, is just, it depends on how it works. I'm not too sure what extra money we're going to get, but yes, it could be either way. I'm not sure what your preference would be. I can detail a bit more than what it is.
Do a council agenda. You're already writing this report, so just add it to that.
Add it to this, and I'll just be less projects listed on here. It'll just be the ones for completing this 3 year period, and possibly the next 3 years would be the way to go, probably. Because that's what we're putting the NZTA anyway. So.
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, I think my intention was to have this conversation further with you in more detail in regards to the next LTP and how we're putting that together in terms of the transport program. I did think about, because of this may be a step change for us as a council in terms of funding, putting a lot more funding potentially into road safety improvements, that we actually get the NZTA along to explain the initiative that they're trying to work us towards, and help you with understanding where we need to play a part in conjunction with them. I haven't asked them that yet, but I think it would be a worthwhile thing for you to do, for us to do.
That would be good, Andrew, and we'll include that on a briefing today.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The other thing I was say, a well-maintained network is a safer one as well, not just doing upgrades to existing networks.
Mover and a seconder for this report. Alexander, seconded. Mugford. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you very much. Item number 5, property transaction update. Thanks, Douglas.
Thank you, Bishop. So first item, reports on major projects. So as the Mayor referred to before, we've put the changes in red, so hopefully that's helped you with your efficiency. So Selwyn Aquatic Centre, if you've seen being past the site in the last few weeks, we're now getting some beams across the new pool area, which is obviously pretty exciting in terms of progress. Te Aratia, now that we can get down that road really well, you can get a really good look at that on a regular basis. You may have noted we've put a couple of asphalt paths across the school area where Moore Street Extension ultimately would come through. We've done that to make it easier for school children to get down Tennyson Street and across to the crossing, because we have to keep the footpath on the Te Aratia side closed for a while. So just so there's no surprises, yes, in some point that will be wrapped up because we bring the road through. We just felt the benefit to the school community was sensible. Also stopped children had to zigzag across the road. So a little bit of extra. I do think there was about another $20,000, unfortunately, but we just felt it was worth it for that cost. I might just talk about COVID issues in public scrutiny, if that's okay.
Yep.
Moving on to Foster Park Indoor Courts. So again, good progress being made on this site. It's just working really like a charm, this project, which is really good. Yeah, all the builds are rolling along really well. Next one is the rugby club rooms. Again, been a difficult month. Hopefully we're almost there with that. And I do know that there's a certain amount of agitation from the rugby club, as I reported last month, with the contractor. I don't think there's much more we could have done as council trying to make this work. I have to say though, if you go down and look at that building, it fits really well on the park. It looks like it's been there for many years. And just the way it's been carefully put on the site, the pathways and everything also flow through. So it does look as though it belongs, which is a good outcome. Okay, I haven't seen that, so maybe I'm not going. That's all right. Anzac Lane, Brookside subdivision. So just waiting for our registration of interest, which comes in, I think, either later this week or early next week from agents. Responsible camping. So delighted, surprised to get the new forms, which arrived, I think, mid last week, due this Friday. So we've got a session tomorrow where we're going to try and bring together our application for this. We've been hugely successful in the past. We'll see what else we can put in for this round of work on responsible camping. I think it was a wee bit of a surprise that government is still running this fund, so that's good sign that they want locals to be out in their camping areas over the coming season. So we'll see if we get there. And as you can see in red, just really good progress on our projects there, particularly those 4 toilets, 2 of them almost ready to be opened and the other 2 just going through site investigations at the moment. So good progress. The next item, camping activities on council land. Look, we just haven't done anything in this space in the last wee while, so that needs a wee bit of work from staff in the coming months, so nothing to update on that. Crown disposal program, Rob's given a fulsome update there. This is anything specific. DOC are working hard on these issues, but they're also a bit resource tight as well, they tell us. So hopefully that doesn't hold us up much more than it has already. Leaston, so I think there was a report given to the 2 Ellesmere Ward councils. I think Councillor Miller were involved in that today, so hopefully that's brought you up to speed on those issues, and we're just updating what's called the bulk and location plan for the medical centre to allow for any addition in the future. I might also just mention something in public square about that site, Your Worship, as well, about the medical centre side. Horata, so quite a lot of information on this. I actually went on site, as I said, on Friday, and I did a first for myself. I walked the historic heritage racecourse track. Quite a delightful walk, quite enjoyed it actually, with Johnny, who's the main trainer out there. I suppose the heritage is in the view of those who know about it. There's no signage to say it's a historic track. There's no memorabilia. It's a curved track. It's quite pleasant in that regard. It's one of those tricky bits about, well, where is the heritage value, in my humble opinion. That aside, it adds something to the environment, and certainly at this stage, you know, you wouldn't rip it out or move it if you weren't going to be putting the new building on, because it does serve its purpose. That aside though, the point that has been overlooked during this process about the track is the health and safety aspects. So one of my things I was looking at with the trainer was, where would you put in additional fencing to resolve the health and safety of a horse bolting? That the plus side is that the front bit of the track, which is the closest to the road, does have the best corralling of horses away and not with the public. The problem is, like someone like myself walking around there, not realizing there was a trainer at work, could get themselves, I suppose, into a bit of an issue there. So we do need to have a look at that in due course and tidy that up. The question though is whether how much the trainers will be working there in the future, and that is something we just need to have keep as an ongoing discussion. In my report, I refer there to survey. I think I did notice Laurie Squires from Horata was here at the back of the meeting early on, so shame she wasn't here to stay there, but they ran quite I suppose, a productive meeting about 2 weeks ago with about 50 members of the community. Ran a wee survey there, which reported on. There was also the additional meeting the following day, which the church spoke about their challenges. And then obviously we've run our own engagement process. One of the processes we're just suggesting we should really sit down is just have a look again at the existing building. I've got some points there on page 129 that I think we need to do. I do that on the basis that if we're going to have the heritage order from the district plan, well, we probably need to have a look and see how we honour that heritage order with those costs. It also, I suppose, just means that if we do want to consider more seriously this as an option, we'll have some costings. It won't be at a detailed level. I would keep it at a reasonably high level with a sort of a plus or minus percentage of how accurate our costings are, just to get a feel for what that would look like. If there's no interest in that, I'd rather some indication at this meeting, but I would suggest we will need to do that because it is an option that we will be tested on, mainly because of that heritage order. We've given enough indication in the long-term plan that we were going to not use this building, but the heritage order proposal has changed that. Is there anything on Hororata that anyone would like to raise? Or maybe Councillor Mugford, you might have some words of wisdom for us.
Yeah, on the management plan, there was a thing that seems to be coming up all the time and it hasn't been discussed, is the future of the pond and the keeping it full of water. So Douglas has probably got under control, but it's something that is of a concern. The racetrack is the other concern, and I agree with Douglas, health and safety are the biggest problems with that, and I think that's something the council are going to have to look at later on. But it seems strange to me that we would make a hall, a heritage hall, and on the same, with the other hand, we'd actually allow on 200 on the money for it to be demolished, which is what we're actually doing here. So we've got to have it one way or the other. If we either sell the building or we demolish it. But if we actually demolished it, we were going to probably end up with demolishing fees as well. So I think they should be taken into consideration on the actual net cost at the end of it. So the other things, there seems to be a lot of confusion on the use of the existing hall. And it was one of the things that came up at the meeting that Douglas was at, and someone had been back through the minutes and said that there'd been 12 paid for meetings for the year before. So are we looking at a hall that maybe is going to have bums on seats for that amount of meetings, but are we looking at a hall that's going to be used for a lot more diverse things like sports and such like? And I'm not sure that in the plans that I've seen that's really been looked at. So I think we've got a lot to look at. And the other thing is on the meeting on the 22nd of September, who is actually running that? Because I think that's really important that the council should own this management plan and not an outside organisation. And I think that would go down better with the community. And then going further on the 30th, there was a public meeting which I invited Vanessa from planning to come along and describe what could happen to the stone church. There's about $5 million to actually rebuild it. So your alternatives are that you leave it fenced off for the maximum of time that the council will let you leave a damaged building standing. You either pull it down or you leave or make it into a ruin. So there are a lot of the decisions that the community are trying to make. And for me, there's a huge amount going on in that community all at the same time. So it's getting very, very confusing who wants what and for what reason. Thanks.
Grant. I guess I want to provide some context from the outside as well, because we have built a number of community centres and other places. And what Bob describes about use of the building is often a function of how dilapidated the actual building has got, because people won't hire or use it because of such poor quality. But I guess we need to be signalling to Hororata, and not only Hororata, but the wider Selwyn community, but the upcoming LTP, in my opinion, will be an opportunity for us to not only look at Hororata, but our network approach. And I think, you know, the conversation in Hororata there's a Melbourne conversation about, if we have a brand new facility in Hororata, what does that mean for Springfield and those other surrounding districts? Do they resolve themselves to the fact that actually the centre of community is Hororata? And this is where our whiz-bang offering is going to be, because clearly we can't sustain multiple places all over the place. So that needs to be on the table as well. And people need to understand that this is not just a Hororata decision, this is a Malvern decision, considering when you take into account the facilities in Darfield and further up the plains. So as you say, Bob, there's a lot of talking and thinking to be done here about what the future of Malvern looks like. And I don't want to denigrate the work that Go Hororata have put in, because you wouldn't find a more motivated and outstanding group of people who are working on behalf of their community, who are enthusiastic. But unfortunately, we're tasked with looking at the wider community as well. And so that's our difficult job.
Just in regard to the 22nd of February Council Make video, I've sort of flagged with Go Hororata, who are just been putting together a bit of an agenda there. We do need someone either independent or maybe an elected member chairing that meeting, just to try and, I suppose, just show that leadership. It's there are many entities wanting an interest in this process, which is great, but it is becoming quite crowded, isn't it, in that space of discussion? So.
And I'd still like to see that council run meeting. I really would. I would like to, I would like the council to organise it, and I'd like the council to run it, because that takes local personalities out of it a wee bit, and I think we'd probably get better answers.
Okay, well, we'll work through how we do that and who represents that.
Douglas, on that matter, just wondering how much we do prior to LTP, and how much of this becomes an LTP process rather than necessarily doing it twice or having it re-looked at twice over the next 6 months. Have you got a feel for the amount of effort going in now as opposed to what might just need to wait a couple of months?
Well, in essence, we need to do some work now on alternate option like the existing hall to inform the LTP. Otherwise, we'll just leave the $4.6 million budget sitting, which is what we would do as a placeholder anyway. Whereas if there's an alternate option, which maybe during LTP consultation has more support because time's moved on, then we should have that price in there. So we do need to do this work now. Just regards to the lake, we did a bit of work last year on plugging the cracks and so forth, and that seems to have worked far better. I think it's just a matter of time, these things just to seal up. So we have a couple of sources of water, so we'll obviously take those up and pursue them. So
thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to comment that with the Rugby Club Rooms, Douglas, they're advertising an opening on September 4th with a guests-only event followed by an opening to the public that evening on that Friday. So they're certainly heading towards the public opening.
Cool, that's good news. Earthquake-proof buildings, nothing really to add except provincial growth fund, just echoing Councillor Miller's comments that it's a bit frustrating, but it is what it is. And then the balance of the projects are just updates on some of our more significant ones leading through to where they're at. There'll be progress on construction on those, particularly over the next 2 to 3 months. Finally, I think the last one is the Milk Pond subdivision, and you'll see quite a bit of, again, life in this particular project. Hopefully the attachments were reasonably self-explanatory. I suppose the question would be if there was any desire to make the entire site a reserve. Now is the time to tell us that. Staff advice would be that lot 6 is actually adding to reserve space, which is more than is needed, but accepting of the space it is probably appropriate. And my advice would be that that's vested, if we're going to do that, let's vest it in as a reserve now as part of the subdivision process. Yes, we could hold it as a freehold title, but actually, if we're genuinely about wanting to hold it as a reserve, then we hold it there. There has been a bit of a question about whether lot 7, which the country club building sits on, could also be vested as a reserve. Yeah. That's a bit challenging for us because we've got a building on there being used for commercial use. So that would actually sort of gazump ourselves a wee bit there in terms of the legislation. So we can't do that at this stage. There has to be some understanding that that is the best site to keep as a reserve, and we wouldn't change that. So any comments, views on that would be appreciated.
Deborah.
Thank you. I've had correspondence from people within the Lincoln Community Committee and from those that were on the committee previously. I've highlighted before the hard thought win, if you like to call it that, of actually getting an Esplanade Reserve along the Liffey. And I am in agreement that we have some, with regards to the country club, that while we're using it for commercial, that there is a memorandum of understanding or something on the title that actually says if it's not being used by the council for commercial purposes, then it will relate back to a reserve. I think there needs to be something, because we're all not going to be sitting around this table in 10 years' time maybe, and I think it's important for the community to understand that there needs to be some sort of covenant protection for that request. And I'm in agreement with the other lot being definitely a reserve. So I'd just like the council to consider that particular issue about the covenant on the country club, just to give it the continuity of the linkage of trying to create the Esplanade Reserve right through there.
Thank you, Mark.
I disagree with the community requests. There is an over provision of reserves. I think providing lot 6 was generous. I would concur with perhaps a note on the title for lot 7 that in a future subdivision that we would like to retain some Esplanade Reserve from it. This was not bought with Lincoln Community Funds. It's bought with district-wide funds. As a holding pattern, the fact we're getting a commercial lease out of it's very helpful. I would like to see the subdivision of lots 1 to 5 to proceed. Communities will always want the maximum amount of reserves above and beyond what may be considered a reasonable amount. We as a council have to take a broader view than that. We have to say, yes, we've heard you. No, we don't agree. And that let's move on. Otherwise, we will continue to get the Lincoln community, or some of the Lincoln community, bombarding us with this ongoing request. And it's time we stood our ground, as we've done previously, and said, no, lot 6 was a generous allocation addition to the reserves. We'll consider it an Esplanade strip from lot 7 in the future, but let's subdivide it. Let's get the yield out of it and let's move on.
Well, I guess just to provide some context as well, on the unusual position I am the representative on the Lincoln Community Committee. They are extremely passionate about this project. They value the Liffey and its environs highly, and there's been significant movement by the council from the original plan with the decision to allow lot 6 to become reserve, which I applaud the council for doing. I think it's a great move. I think it's going to really enhance the area. Having the country club site there also gives parking access for weekends where community members can come in there and park on the asphalt and access the Liffey. It's a great way of parking and walking, and we've really seen growth in that. And so we're just taking into account Mark's view of the world. Looking at from a council perspective, I think we put about $1 million into this when we went into this arrangement. Selling lots 1 to 5 will return $1 million to the council coffers with an additional ongoing lease income from the country club. So it's probably a pragmatic solution. And, you know, I've got to be true to my community and say that I'd like to see the whole lot as reserve. But I accept that the mood at the table is probably that it's a good pragmatic solution. I would caution against any amending of titles with words or deeds, because you never know what the future holds around what the future use of that building might be. And to say if the council doesn't own it anymore, it must become reserved, could negate the ability of the council to sell that at a peppercorn rental to an arts group or some other group which is going to use it to enhance our community. So I wouldn't want to tongue tie future councils about how they might dispose or use that piece of land. And I think it might be the time to be wise and say our future councillors will be wise enough to deal with this when it comes in front of them, because we shouldn't underestimate our future leaders. They will understand where this has come from, and they will get community feedback when the time comes. So that's probably my piece.
Thank you, Malcolm and Shane.
Well, as I have said at this table before, this is a heritage site in a very old community and so on. I realise Rolleston doesn't have many heritage sites. I also realise that we are looking to spend a lot of money on a reserve here in this very order paper later on, which I would like to remind certain councillors of. I have been listening to this community about this site for the last 6 years at least. I have been regularly rung up and spoken to by the community. I've spoken up about not selling this land on multiple occasions. This is the site of the old mill. This is a beautiful site, and I invite you to go and walk through and have a look. It's a fantastic spot to be in. I am fully in favour of holding on to lot 6, and I would like to see lot 7 held back to the future, because as Councillor Miller has said, you never know what's happening. But what I remind you all of is this is a heritage site. Once it is gone, it's gone forever. And the people of Lincoln have spoken, multiple generations of people of Lincoln have spoken to me, younger and older, about the wish to retain this site, and various other uses have been promoted for the site over the years by the community. I would very much like to see 6 left as a recreation reserve, as I stated the last time this was spoken about at this table. And I do agree with Deborah in that 7 we have at least, and as Councillor Miller has said, it provides wonderful car parking and great access to that area. I think that this is a real treasure, a wee jewel in the middle of Lincoln Township, and it should be retained for the people of Lincoln and the whole of Selwyn. All you've got to do is go and have a look at where it is, its location. It is a wonderful site to be retained.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Kia ora, tēnā te mihi koutou. Douglas, thank you very much for the report. I guess I'd just like to echo fellow Councillor Malky there, and I took advice from the discussion we had last week from our fellow councillors, especially Sophie, Councillor McInnes. Actually took my kids for a walk there on Saturday, as I mentioned before, and it's beautiful. I'm ashamed to say that I hadn't really walked through the walk before, and it was accessible, it was easy to walk, it was an incredible source of wildlife, and it is a taonga. It's our natural taonga. It has historic and cultural value, and I would like to understand what cultural value it does have to the Runanga, and what their thoughts would be on this position as well. I think the options D and E do provide a pragmatic solution, a good balance. There's a commercial return there, but also retains the reserve and the surrounding areas for the benefit of our communities and our wider communities. If we're looking for somewhere to bring town to rule, this is a perfect opportunity to highlight that and bring our cousins from Christchurch through and have a walk through and really treasure it. It is a taonga, and I think, yeah, either option D or E is a good solution. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the conversation we've had so far. I'll move the recommendation that council receives the report. A, that we receive the report on property projects for information, and B, supports option E as subdivision plan for Mill Pond Lane, just to give staff some direction on what we want. Councillor Miller?
I would suggest that the community, as it would really like option D to be considered, because it maximises the amount of reserve land to 905 square metres. It adjusts the size of the sections where they retain to 6. By going to E, all you do is increase the size of the section slightly, add to the detriment of the reserve area. So I suggest if with your agreement that you make it option D, please.
Sure, happy to have that as D then, if that's, yep. Seconded, Grant Miller? Yep. Okay, all those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. General business, there's none. Resolution to exclude the, Douglas, thank you for your report. Resolution to exclude the public, moved Councillor Bland, seconded Gallagher. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. And it's 10 to 3, so we're going to take a short break. Yep, and we'll start back at 10 past 3, so you've got 20 minutes.